All right. Hello, Dr. Church. It's good to
Hi.
have you this lovely afternoon.
Okay.
All right. So we're gonna talk a little bit today about a book you're learning, you're writing, and about what you've learned throughout your career. And it's gonna be a little bit about your life and how you got into medicine and surgery. And we're gonna go a little bit into details about all those things. But we're gonna start in the beginning, talking about you a little bit. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what were the highlights of your childhood and your favorite memory.
Okay. So I was born in 1950 in Wellington, New Zealand. And actually, the weekend I was born, it's a good story because the British Isles rugby team was playing the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, at Athletic Park that weekend. And my dad was an orthopedic house surgeon, and he was on call at the park. And it was a very close game, and the Lions were winning. And in those days, if you got injured during a game, you weren't allowed to put on a substitute. So you either had to keep playing with your injury or you had to go off, and then your team was short-handed. So the All Blacks were down two men. And the captain of the All Blacks, who turned out later to be an obstetrician gynecologist in my dad's class at medical school, got injured. He broke his collarbone. So my dad strapped him up, sent him back on the pitch, and he scored the winning try.
It's
Brilliant.
awesome. It was a win on both sides.
It was, and that was the Saturday. Then the Sunday, the 25th, I was born, which is notorious because that's the day the Korean War began. But the Lions, like half a dozen of them, came to visit me in my hospital bed, and they were from Scotland and Ireland, so they called me the Wee All Black, which was the furthest thing from the truth. Because I did play rugby at school, but my secret was to try and get away as far away from the ball as I could, while at the same time looking like I was interested in picking it up. But I didn't want to do that, so I was not a sportsman of any variety. So that was my birth, and then my dad became a surgeon, and back in those days, this was the early 50s. If you were a New Zealand surgeon, fresh out of surgical training, you went over to England to practice on the English for 3 or 4 years until you got really good, and then you came back and went into a job in New Zealand. So you couldn't just graduate from surgical training and go straight to a job. That didn't happen. So my dad took us over there, and in those days we had to go on a boat. It was 6 weeks.
How old were you?
I was 1 when we went, and I was 4 when we came back.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently I had this English accent, so I sounded a bit like Pommy. And I got to be friends. We came back on a tramp steamer with some passenger rooms. So the crew took a liking to me and taught me all their nasty language. So when I got back in English language, I sounded like a sailor. Much to the disgust.
Which does not sound like you at all
No,
right
it
now.
doesn't.
I sound like a sailor a little bit.
I completely lost all that. And then we settled on the North Shore of Auckland, which is a beach place. So we lived on the beach for pretty much all of my childhood. And I went to school there and grew up there. So it was a really privileged time to grow up.
Okay. So, although I wanted to get into how you got into medicine, but I know from prior conversations that your dad meant a lot and he's someone that you hold dear to your heart more than just a parent. So tell me a little bit about your dad.
Well, actually, he was the opposite of me. He and my mum were very social. They were always having parties. My dad was a chain smoker. He liked to drink. The sun was always over the yardarm. So there's a saying in the English Navy that if the sun's over the yardarm, you know the yardarms are those parallel horizontal parts of the mast where the sails are hanging from. The sun was over the main yardarm, it was time for a drink. And then when you had one drink, which was normally either a gin and tonic or a scotch and water, then you put your empty glass on your head, and that's a sign that you want the other half. So I hated the taste of alcohol, and so I was opposite to him. He was also a very good golfer. Like he played in the New Zealand Open one year, and from a young age I would caddy for him. And he taught me how to play, and I got to be reasonably good, but nothing like him. So, but in those days there were no carts, so I had to carry his bags. For that, I got the sum of 2 and 6, which was back in the days before dollars and cents. We had shillings, pound shillings,
Uh
and
huh.
pence. So 2 and 6 was 2 shillings and 6pence, which was a coin, like a silver coin. So I remember that. And then from an early age, he took me on his rounds. So before he became a surgeon, he had to serve some time in general practice, and so he delivered babies, and so I would go and visit his patients with him. And then I would go and watch him operating. I was 10 the first time I went into the operating room. So it was kind of in my blood, I think.
Do you remember the case?
No,
Uh huh.
no, I don't. But he used to be the surgeon for the Royal New Zealand Navy. And I loved going there with him because everyone sort of was saluting him and saying, "Yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir." um, and then I did his locum when I graduated before I came over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to go and be the surgeon at the Navy for a while.
So was he an orthopedic surgeon, or was he a general surgeon that did orthopedics too?
A general surgeon, but during your rotation and training, you did an orthopedic rotation.
Got
I
it.
did an orthopedic rotation.
Okay.
Did a few hips and knees and things.
Did you divert him?
No. They couldn't walk for a while afterwards. That's the equivalent.
So clearly, you had a lot of medicine and surgery going in your family while you were growing up. So I guess that played a role. But what really drove you towards medicine and surgery? Because I think you had an alternate career path in your mind.
I had one in my mind. Yes.
Correct. I
I
remember
was
that.
going to be a priest when I was about 10 to 12. That's when I was particularly devout.
Uh huh.
And I think I've always been somewhat devout, but I realized that that wasn't my calling. And then I was looking around for a calling. My parents, I think, wanted me to be a lawyer. So I spent a summer holidays being a legal clerk because I had some uncles who were lawyers. Solicitors, they were called. And it was the most boring 6 weeks I've ever spent in my entire life. I just wanted to shoot myself every day. Oh man, just taking the briefs, take these over here, file these briefs here, those briefs there. And they're not the sort of short underwear briefs, they're bloody boring briefs. Go down the bank and do this. It's just shuffling documents here, there, and everywhere is basically all I did. So no, that wasn't for me. It just turned out that the Auckland Medical School was opening the year after I was going to finish high school, by coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I applied for it. And it was quite competitive. I think there were about 300 applicants, and they were looking to appoint 60 people in the first class. So fortunately I got in, and that was that.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one of each. Brother's 2 years younger, and my sister's 5 years younger.
Okay. What did they do in their life?
My brother was one of these guys that works every job you can think of.
Uh huh.
And then he ended up becoming a lawyer when he was
Interesting.
about 50. So I have to admire him for going through that.
Mm-hmm.
But he left New Zealand and went to live in England for a long time, and now he lives in Australia. So
Wow.
almost disowned him from that point of view. My sister trained in journalism, and she became an excellent cook. So she got my mother's genes.
Uh-huh.
And then she started a Montessori childcare school
Oh, wow.
in Wellington, where she lives. And now she's retired, and now she writes.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So,
All right, so we talked a little bit about family. Tell me, how did you balance having a family during your training and during being attending, at least early in your career, and now even since you have to put so many hours at work and so many effort at work. So how do you balance those two together?
but I think it's all about setting your priorities. So, and there are various levels. So you're talking about your life. So, probably number one priority is my faith. That's number one, because without that, what are we? And then number two is my family. And you don't really want anything to happen in your life that's going to upset that or ruin that or wreck that, because they're not only people that you love the most, they're your support. Without the family, again, where are you on this earth? And then you come to your priorities at work. So I've always thought my patients are my top priority. And sometimes the patients come up against the family. So your son has a softball game and you really want to get to that, but you've got to take someone to the OR. So do you put the OR off for a couple of hours so you can go and see your son, or do you take the patient? And it's always the patient. It's always the patient. And when you become a doctor, you have to realize that there will be this conflict, and then you establish your priorities. And I can't speak for anybody else, but to me, that's what's the important thing. So patients first at work, partners second, department third, and institute, Cleveland Clinic, fourth. So, and other people, you might be different. It just depends on the way that you think. But that's kind of been the guiding rule for my life. So, when the decision came, we got this chance to come and live in Cleveland, but we're going to have to move 12,000 miles, and we're going to have to leave our family and our country, everything we know and love, to go to this really scary place where there are guns and bad men and bad women and just different. And so we talked about it and prayed about it and thought about it and went through it, and then it seemed to be the right way to go. And so we came. But for each life-changing decision like that, it's not your decision in my mind, it's the family's decision, how it impacts the family. And if it didn't work out for the family, we wouldn't have come. With my wife, it said, no, I'm definitely not going to the States, we wouldn't have come.
You mentioned faith a little bit, and I know you value faith a lot. And we both agree there's an intersection between religion and medicine at the same time. So tell me, what does faith mean to you as a person, and how does faith and medicine and surgery intersect between each other?
Well, I'm a Christian, as you know, so my belief is in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came to save us from our sins. I want to be like Jesus. I want to live like Jesus. Jesus was a servant, and Jesus told us the golden rule: you love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. So that's how I've tried to live my life, is to love others probably better than I love myself. And so I try always to see things from other people's point of view. So whenever there's, it affects your patients. So I'm going into a room to tell a patient that their mother has cancer. How would I feel? And how would I like my doctor to tell me that my mother was dying of cancer? And so I approach it like that, and it just guides my life. And the other thing is, we're really lucky as physicians because we get to deal with people at their very most vulnerable, and we deal with their bodies and their metabolism and their tissues, their biochemistry, their anatomy. And the more I get into it, the more I realize that we didn't just get here by chance. The complexity of the human body and just the complexity of the biochemical pathways within the cells just couldn't have just happened at random chance. So there must be a creator. And that fits in with my worldview and my spiritual view, and it leaves me content.
There's a couple of questions I wanted to mention in between, but I'm going to jump a lot forward. You mentioned how you think of those patients when you're talking to them. You think of God, and you think of how would that mean to you if someone's talking to you. How did you deal with complications, and when your intention was to do one thing and the outcome would be sometimes the opposite, and it could result in some harm to those patients? So how did you think of that and manage it, and how did you talk to the patients about it?
Well, if I can go back one step, bad things happen in this world because this is, in my belief system, this is a broken world. It's not the way God intended it. God intended this to be the Garden of Eden. And then original sin came along. and it's just tainted us as humans. A lot of people say that we're inherently good, but we're not really. We're inherently bad. We all have a knowledge of God built into us because we're the creations of God. But we're prone to do bad things. And I think the proneness varies from people to people. So we all have inherent value, but we all have the taint of original sin within us. And that is borne out in the sickness that's in the world, the diseases, the illness. I believe that in the Garden of Eden, for example, which was and which will be again sometime, there will be no cancer, there'll be no illness, there'll be no disease, there'll be no need for doctors, there'll be no need. It'll be a perfect world as God had intended it all along. So when I see disease, it's our reality. And then I see my role. God has a plan for each of us. And I think when you're following his plan for you and when you're not, deep down inside. And I know that I've been gifted in certain aspects of surgery, for example, and I'm using those gifts, I think, in the way that God intended me to. So I see patients and I do my best for them, but I know that the human biology is very variable, that things go wrong, and that bad things are going to happen, but it's equally my role to get the patients through those bad things. I love it when things go right. It's beautiful. But I know that not every case is going to go right. The thing I don't like is when it's my fault. And I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I make mistakes. Sometimes it's omission, sometimes it's commission. I really hate mistakes that could have been prevented. An error of judgment's one thing, but doing something carelessly or pulling too hard on something is another. And I try and learn from those. I'm philosophical about it. I do my best to get the patient over it, but I don't beat myself up about it. You can't. And if you don't mind me going on a little bit longer,
I would love you going on a little bit longer.
I think one of the keys to a happy life as a doctor is to be able to compartmentalize. So quite often there are bad things going on at home, and then you come to work and you're feeling destroyed when you come to work, but you can't let that destruction affect how you deal with the patients or your workmates or the nurses. You can't go around like with a boot face or glum because you just got reamed out by your wife. You come to work and that's work, so that's the compartment. Similarly, if at work there's a terrible complication and you're feeling really bad or your patient just died, then you go home and you can't let that interfere with your home life. That's the way that there's madness and unhappiness and dissatisfaction, and you give it up. So the ability to compartmentalize is very important.
What do you think God's intention for us or goal for us on this earth as human beings and as professionals?
I think this is a good question, which comes directly from, I can remember the catechisms when I was a boy. What is God's purpose for us? God's purpose for us is to honor Him, and I think implicit in that is a sense of developing holiness. Holiness and mankind don't really go together, but God has given us a set of instructions. It's in the Bible, and then Jesus came along and modified that. And I think being obedient to the Word of God will restore, through Jesus, restores the relationship between man and God, which is broken. It's broken. God still speaks to us, and He wants to restore that relationship, and He offers us a way of doing that. But it's up to us to accept that. So that's my belief as a Christian. And that's what I'll say about that.
And my question is, what is he? What do you think his goal for us as professionals when we're doing our job? Like, why are we doing this, and what does he want us to do with it?
Well, I think it's like the parable of the talents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a man was given like $5, and he went away and buried it in the ground, and came back and he gave the $5 back to the boss, and he was put in jail because he did nothing with it. Whereas the guy that invested the talents and came back with 50 talents was commended. So God has given us talents and skills, and He wants us to use them. You know, it goes back to what I said. Everybody has a role on this earth. I strongly believe that we have a path, and I think it's easier to look back on a path and to see, you know, when you went off it and things weren't good, it got a bit shaky, and you got back on the path and you felt better. So I have a daughter now whose husband is just finishing a PhD, and they don't have jobs. They have no idea what their future is. They can't see God's path for them, but there will be one, and chances will happen, and things will open up, and they'll have the opportunity to go that way or not. And the tricky thing is to know when you're on that path. So some people are lucky, and I'm lucky because I always had. I don't like to blow my trumpet or anything, but I think I have pretty good hands when it comes to surgery, and good instincts, and a good package of like being able to diagnose things, to sort out priorities, to deal with what needs to be dealt with. And they're not mine. It's not praiseworthy to me that I have those abilities. I was given them, and then I was given the opportunity to come here, and that's an amazing story in itself. Because again, I just go back a little bit. My After I finished my fellowship, my surgical fellowship, I did research for 2 years, and towards the end of that 2 years, again, the trip to England to practice on the English came about. So I had a job lined up in Leeds, but then my professor was at a surgical meeting in Hobart, of all places, Tasman. It's like the armpit of the world is Hobart. And he was lined up at the airport counter behind an Australian surgeon named Victor Fazio, and they just got to talking.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and my boss said, I have this. He must have said something nice. I have this person who's interested in colorectal surgery. Do you have a spot for him in your program? And so Dr. Fazio said, not this year. This was 1982, but next year he can come. And the rest was history. So if my professor had been 3 minutes late and somebody else had been in line between him and Fazio, this would never have happened. I would have been a New Zealand surgeon. I don't know what I would have done. I mean, my whole life would have been different, and things would have been different here. You would have been different.
True.
I mean, it's like when you watch Back to the Future and something changes in the past and pictures of people disappear from the photographs because everything has changed. So it's hard not to look back at events like that and see the providence of God in your life guiding it. But you don't see that at the time, but then looking back, you do.
I always think that looking back at your path, you realize how things make sense to you more now. But I always believed also that like if you without working hard, you won't know what's that path that God has for you. Like right now, things make sense, but you must have worked hard in your life to realize that there's a chance here. I'll take advantage of it to the best of my capabilities, and then you realize that was a path that's meant for you.
Exactly. Well, I think the path is designed for someone that likes to work like you do. So, I mean, you could take this to the ridiculous extremes, but it works out.
Yeah. Talking about all this and now talking about you in the mid of your career or the end of your career or wherever you are, but you've always had an investment in advancing yourself and advancing other people. Tell me, how do you look at surgical training and education, and What does it mean to you having mentees and being a mentor for them?
Um, well, surgery is basically an apprenticeship. That's how you learn it, or that's how you used to learn it until all these skills labs and things came along. But it's still an apprenticeship, so you have to go through and experience somebody showing you how to do things. Um, and as a trainee, you bond with certain surgeons better than others, and some of them just fit with you, and fit with you mentally, and fit with you physically, and their whole attitude to disease and patients, and you get on really well with them, and you think, oh, I want to be like him when I grow up. And then you may get 60% of your practice style from that person, and then you'll meet somebody else. Oh, I really like the way that person handles the scope, so you get a little bit from that person. So the best way is to, at the end of your training, you're a hybrid of the people that you've worked with, and some you just reject them out of hand. Bloody hopeless. But so it's a little bit like every human being is unique, and I think every surgeon is unique because everybody has had a unique path through the training scheme. And then when you get on the other side and you see these bright, eager young faces coming in, again you bond with some more than others, and it's a personality thing, I think. So when I trained, the typical surgical personality was like, I am God, and I know everything, and don't you dare question me. And the patients are just like dummies, sitting there, and the surgeon, I'm going to do this, this, and this. It's not like any questions. There could be no questions. I said it. This is the truth. I'm doing it. You're lucky to have me. Goodbye. That's the sort of thing it is. And I hated that. I'm not like that. I was not the typical surgeon. The other typical surgeon thinks they're hard drinking, womanizing type people. So I wasn't like that, and it really sometimes made me doubt early on, should I actually be a surgeon? Maybe I should be an internist, because I really loved to diagnose. I loved Sherlock Holmes. I loved figuring things out. I didn't like pushing pills, so I think that surgery was fine for me. And this is the first time I've really been thinking about it. I didn't give in to the stereotype of surgery that was back then in the 60s and 70s. I think it's changed a lot. It's had to change because the behavior continued, but people crack down on it now, and you can't do it. But it still happens because you can't really change personalities. There are some people there that are just not very nice, and they make it through. But in terms of bonding, there are some people that you really bond with. And I can remember a handful of fellows that somehow or other operated just like me. And I was, you let the fellow do one half of something and I do the other half, and you're looking across, whose hands are those? They look like my hands because they do things exactly like the way I do it. I just love that. Love it. And then, you and I have brains that work almost exactly the same. So we think about the same things, we get excited about the same things. We develop similar aims even though we're not even talking about it. So those are very rewarding. When you're faced with somebody you don't get on with, that's the challenging part, because they're still entitled to your attention and your care and your instruction. And so I tried to develop a discipline of instructing people the same way, sort of with kindness and with thoroughness, and teaching them to do things the way I would do them and think about things the way I would think about them, regardless. So that's the bottom line. So that's the sort of teaching aspect of mentorship, but the other aspect of mentorship is advancing other people's careers. And not everybody's in a position to do that. And really like it when I'm in a position to do that, and then I do my utmost for that person because um, having gotten to that position, they have to have accomplished certain things. So.
I was gonna save this question for another episode, but you mentioned that you didn't get along with the stereotype of surgery back in the days, and you at some point thought that maybe you didn't belong here, but there's something in you that drove you to go against that stereotype and develop your own strategy or your own style and still go on for it. And I think that translates a little bit into science and the way you think of research and topics and questions. So tell me, what does the word visionary mean to you?
Um, well, visionary, I think, has a sense of being able to see the future. Um, so a vision is like an image that is unreal. It's um, it's your conception of how things are going to be or how things should be. Um, I think in me, I have something of that, but I like to think of myself as a thoughtful surgeon, and I've always, I think we've talked about it, and you can have surgeons that are pure technicians, like cut along the dotted line, but the thoughtfulness comes in thinking about what's going on in that patient, what's causing their symptoms, what's causing their disease. Is the surgery the right thing for them, even though the textbook says it might be, but in this patient, what is it about them that is different? Everybody's different. And to just be thoughtful about disease. Like, for example, when I'm looking in a colon and I'm seeing a few polyps, I'm sometimes seeing inside the cells and seeing what pathways are whirring around and whizzing around and producing these polyps. And you're seeing an inflammation and you're thinking, what is going on at a molecular level to drive that? How does that make a difference to how I'm going to treat this patient? And is there anything else I want to find out from this colonoscopy before I pull the scope out? And then wish that I still was in there taking more biopsies. So there's thoughtfulness in surgery, and that's very important. And being a visionary is something different, and that's, I mean, anyone can be a visionary. And sometimes you can have bad visions. But usually visions are what you want it to be. And it entertains me to do that, to look into the future. And it also helps you to open your mind. You know, it's very easy these days to have a closed mind. But it's important in so many aspects of life to open your mind and to receive all the input and don't prejudge it.
How did you deal throughout your career when you come up with a new idea or a new concept and you just wanted to write about it or discuss it? How did you deal with people that didn't see it through, or rejection around you, or people thinking that, what the hell are you talking about even?
Um, Sometimes I get irritated. I know that, again, not everybody's the same, and not everybody is going to have the same imagination or the same like background as me too. You know, I think what you think about and the ideas you generate as a product, not only of your imagination, like the mobility of your brain, but all the background that leads up to this moment. So it's hard to sort of have a theory about mismatch repair genes if you don't even know that mismatch repair exists. So you take all your background, and then it's just natural to push the edges of knowledge just with your brain, just gently, and see, you know, where did that come from? And, you know, what would happen if the hormones did this, you know, and then you generate hypotheses. Your life is continually generating hypotheses. And I guess once in a while, some new idea will pop into your head if you're thinking like that. And then, oh, this is great. I've got to write this down. You know, it's 11 o'clock at night, you're pretty sleepy. Boom! where's a piece of paper, and you write it down, and then in the morning, then you pursue it, and it's really fun. I just love that sort of stuff.
Okay, so we were talking before that about mentorship and having mentees. Who were your mentors throughout your life, and were they all physicians and surgeons, or you had mentors from other disciplines that you learned stuff from them and just implemented it in your career?
Um, well, my spiritual mentor started off at. I went to Roman Catholic school in New Zealand, and they were English clergy that came over to teach these wild colonial schoolboys who were really badly behaved, except for me. So they had quite an influence on my early devotion to Catholicism and everything that meant. And then my dad was really my first mentor as a doctor and then as a surgeon, and had quite a big impact on me. And he wasn't an academic, but um, he stressed a gentle technique and an exact technique, and he showed me how to operate in planes when I was about 12. So, that's a big advance for me. During my residency, there was one surgeon there, his name was Jim Carter, who had trained at St. Mark's, and he was really good with the large intestine, small intestine. I wanted to be like Jim Carter. he he was he was also a slightly shy, retiring guy. He wasn't Sir Lancelot Spratt type surgeon, um, and so I admired him. I liked him. I wanted to try and be like him. My research mentor was Graham Hill, who was a professor at Auckland. I did 2 years of research with him. He taught me how to write abstracts, write papers, make slides, give presentations, think scientifically. Um, he showed me the importance of statistics, really trained me in research. I'd be eternally grateful. Eternally ungrateful for my early project was metabolism in striated muscle and muscle fiber types like slow twitch, fast twitch. And he made me take a biopsy of my quadriceps, but which meant a little bit of local anesthetic and this bloody great thick needle with a guillotine on the inside plunged into your quadriceps, ka-chunk, and the muscle would bulge into the gap and then it'd slice it off. I couldn't walk for about 6 weeks after that. But unfortunately, my fructose bisphosphatase level was normal. I think I had a lot of slow twitch fibers. Not the fastest person on the planet. But I learned a lot there. And then all the staff here, well, Fazio, Lavery, Jogelman were good mentors, but Fazio was like the mentor of mentors. Really a charismatic, magical guy, super friendly to anybody, with endearing quirks about him, and just a born leader, and very loyal, and gave me my career. I just wouldn't be here without him, so can't say enough about him.
I think we're gonna have a full session that we just talk about him and this department. It's funny that I've been with you guys for a couple of years, but every time you or Dr. Lavery or anyone has mentioned his name, it's interesting how much you guys care for him, and it feels like you've missed out if you didn't know or meet that guy.
Yeah, I've always thought that, and Cleveland Clinic fellows are like, you were there in the physio days or not? And it makes you sad though, because he got sick in 2004 and then he kept working, but he was not the same. So really it's been since about 2003 that physio on high speed, high octane level existed. And I think of those days fondly.